The coalition picked a front man to introduce their articles of impeachment, but it all went terribly wrong as Nixon's defenders proved themselves more than ready for a fight.
For example, they charged the president with joining a conspiracy to obstruct justice. Well, I didn't know about any conspiracy, and so I asked him, when did the president enter into any agreement? Where was he? What were the words used at the time of it?
When and in what respect and how did the president declare that policy? And I wish the gentleman would be rather specific, since it is the heart of the allegation.
Well, of course, the means by which this policy has been done are the ones that are set out subsequent to the second paragraph.
Well, if the gentleman would confine himself to the question of when,
1 through
first,
9.
When was the policy declared?
The committee was embarrassed publicly by the ability of good lawyers like Chuck Wiggins and others to pound away at the broadness of the charges.
A simple parking ticket has to be specific. It has to say what you did that violated the law. It's got to have the license of your car. It's got to have the date that you did it. You want to replace that and say that doesn't have to apply to the president? Why, this is ridiculous.
Listening to Charlie Wiggins and Sandman say that we hadn't provided the specifics, I decided that it was time to recess the committee.
All of them realized they'd been hammered good, and that they didn't make a very good presentation for the record, and that unless something happened, you know, they were going to lose it.
I volunteered to take one of the articles and said that I was prepared to stay up all evening working to make sure that it was as well prepared as it could be for the next day.
After working all night, each member of the coalition had thoroughly mastered his brief. The president's defenders didn't know what hit them.
I would ask the question of Congressman Donahue, and he would yield to somebody who was briefed on that issue, and that person would come back with what he would say abundant evidence of the president's involvement.
Specifically, on March 13, 1973, the president was told that Mr. Strawn had lied to investigators. Specifically, the president, who bears the ultimate responsibility for the enforcement of our laws, did not report this to the Attorney General or to the director of the FBI.
And then when he finished, another member was recognized, and he began filling the record with all the specificity that anybody could ever want.
Specifically, on August 10, Porter testified falsely before the Watergate grand jury. Specifically, on September 12 and 13, Magruder met with Mitchell and Dean to plan a false story regarding certain meetings among Mitchell, Magruder, Dean, and Liddy in early 1972.
Specifically, the president did not tell Kleindienst that he had previously been given this information by Dean.
This detailed recitation of the president's misdeeds went on until television prime time. Then, Chairman Peter Rodino called the vote on the first article of impeachment, charging the president with obstruction of justice.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Mr. Donahue.
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
The voice was hushed, whispered, and it wasn't pleasant on the part of the first one to vote aye.
Mr. Conyers. Aye.
You could tell from the sound of the voice that it was reluctant, but it had to be done.
Mr. Butler.
Aye.
Mr. Cohen.
Aye.
And of course I knew what the votes were then, because I was tallying them up in my mind, and I knew that we had voted overwhelmingly to impeach. And when I cast my vote, my voice just about cracked, and I said aye.
Mr. Rodino.
Aye.
Immediately following the vote, I was traveling into South Arkansas and stopped at one of my favorite places, Ernie Dunlap's store. in Kirby, Arkansas, a place where senior members of the community gathered on a bench in front of the store and solved all of the problems of the day, and then again met the next day to solve the new problems of the day. And I always enjoyed going there. On this occasion, as I drove up and parked my car across the street, I was surprised in that every person on that bench got up and left without speaking, going in different directions. I walked over to Ernie and I said, "Ernie, what's wrong?" And he said, "They didn't like your vote to impeach the president."
Nixon was still in with a fighting chance. Impeachment had to go to a vote on the floor of the House and then on to a trial in the Senate, where the president's accusers needed a 2/3 vote to convict him.
I conceded the issue that we were going to lose in the House, but I felt that the Senate had a glimmer of hope, and I hung that hope until the bitter end.
To be sure of a 2/3 majority, the Senate would need evidence more overwhelming than even the Judiciary Committee had laid out. They'd need a smoking gun. But the White House wasn't giving anything away.
Is the White House going to honor those subpoenas issued this morning?
I didn't know there's any issued yet.
Yes, we've got them for April 4th and June 20th and June 23rd.
Yeah, well,
As always, the subpoenas were for tapes. Special Prosecutor Leon Jaworski demanded 64 more, and he resorted to strong-arm tactics to get them. He could inflict terrible political damage on the president by naming him a co-conspirator in open court. He asked for a meeting with Nixon's lawyer and his chief of staff.
What I did is I said to Haig and to St. Clair, now I will reduce my demands to 18, I believe I said, of these tape recordings. And I'll give you the exact ones I want and forget about the others. And if you don't do that, I must then insist on the subpoena being served, and I must disclose the naming of Nixon as an unindicted co-conspirator because it's important to my sustaining my position on the subpoena.
I said, that sounds like blackmail. And as I recall, he said something like, well, there's blackmail and there's blackmail.
How much time will you give us? And I said, well, I'll give you 2 or 3 days, whatever you need to make the decision. It was decided that I would be notified on Tuesday as to what the decision was. On Monday afternoon, I learned Mr. Nixon spent some 6 hours doing nothing but listening to the 18 tapes.
On one of them, he heard his own voice giving orders that provided conclusive proof of his guilt. This was the smoking gun. He instructed his lawyer to reject Jaworski's demand.
On Monday, not waiting until Tuesday, on Monday, St. Clair called me and said that the president would not agree to it. So when I was advised, I said, well, meet me in court.